All right, we're live. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. So, hi, Stephanie from Kickstarter here. We're here with Matt and Nick from North Drinkware. Matt and Nick are joining us from Portland. I am here in Brooklyn at Kickstarter HQ. Hi, guys.
Hey, how are you?
Good.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for spending your morning or 30 minutes of your morning with us.
We're stoked.
Yeah, so for those of you joining us, we're going to spend the next 30 minutes just doing Q&A with Matt and Nick. We would love your questions for them. The best way to submit questions to us is through either, if you're watching on Google Hangouts, you can just use that great Q&A tool right there on the screen. Or you can tweet at us at Kickstarter Tips. We're making sure to pay attention to that and respond to those tweets. So I'll remind you halfway through. So Matt and Nick, I'm just gonna get started with a question for you while we're waiting for stuff to come in.
Sounds great.
Great.
You had, as we were just sort of talking about, you had a remarkable project on Kickstarter, a very unique success story, just starting a few months ago. You launched, it was the Oregon Pint Glass on Kickstarter in February. It wrapped up in March. And by the end of the project, you had raised over $530,000 from over 5,600 people, which is insane. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. So one thing, when I was looking at your project, one thing I noticed is that an enormous amount of that support came in just the first few days. So over $300,000 from over 3,400 people was just in the first 4 days of your project, which, wow.
Yeah, that was a crazy couple days.
Yeah. So were you expecting that?
We absolutely weren't. I mean, we were hoping for a strong start, but it was way stronger than we had anticipated.
Yeah. I mean, I think, we asked for $15,000, that was our goal. Like, that's what we were hoping for. And I think we had done a lot of organizational legwork before the campaign. And so, like Nick's saying, we were hoping for a strong start. We had some things lined up, but it went at such a blistering rate. And I think it was the third day in, it grew, almost $100,000 in one day. So that was definitely like just crazy to watch and have happen.
So you just sort of alluded to some organizational work you did on the front end to sort of help that successful launch happen. Can you tell us a little bit about what you did to prepare for that launch?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we sort of met as a team, and I think even the full backstory was we were planning on launching in November, and we didn't get our act pulled together, and there were some loose ends, and so we weren't feeling totally great about it. So
and we eventually decided that the timing with Christmas wasn't quite right.
Right. So we were like, we're not going to be able to be a part of the Christmas rush. Let's just pause and wait and get everything a little bit tighter. And what that allowed us to do was we started January 1st with sort of social media communication. We had Twitter and Facebook and Instagram set up, but we were sort of dormant. And so really we started like communicating that in a month, Kickstarter is going to happen. And so we had that sort of January 1st build up. So we did that on social media. We also did that in a direct email outreach to all of our family, all of our friends, all of our colleagues, people that we've worked with over the years, people that we barely knew. We sent an email that was like, in 30 days, we're going to start this Kickstarter campaign. So basically just started to get some momentum rolling and people aware that we were doing something interesting about 30 days out. And so that was sort of the first thing that sort of we were already in that sort of countdown mentality towards the launch of Kickstarter. And then when it launched, we had the same sort of rebroadcast of emails teed up to family, friends, and then also to press a little bit too. And like there's been a lot of comments from other creators that have said this, but finding media outlets that talk about the kind of thing that you're launching, finding who that person is and emailing them directly was the strategy that we took. And so that launch morning, there was a ton of just direct outreach, one-to-one communication to try to seed
Great.
stories.
So had you talked to the press before you launched, and then was it a follow-up on launch day, or really was that the first time you reached out to them?
There were select outlets that we had talked to, and Lee, who's Matt's wife and is our other partner, was sort of leading that effort. And so she had sort of a select list that she wanted to seed beforehand to try to get a pop right at the beginning, but it wasn't the whole gamut. And so we kind of like select throughout the beginning, maybe 2 or 3 outlets.
There weren't many, and I think we were trying to offer exclusives and things like that early on to some press partners, but again, so much of that is maybe. You don't get a hard response, and so it was like, all right, well, we'll have the tools set up. One of the other things that we did that was really helpful was we created a /press zone on our website, so that was an area we could easily push people towards to get assets.
And it had all of our high resolution photography. So
fantastic.
if we got, if Lee would send an email to a blog and they would write back and say, yeah, we'd love to do a post, she could just quickly respond and say, cool,
go here.
Here's the link that has all the photography that you might want to use, and then they could go from there.
And the Kickstarter story is essentially our press release is your whole Kickstarter story. So it's like, this is the idea.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, your Kickstarter page is the best press release, right?
Yeah, it was perfect. But those days were crazy. I mean, that was crazy. Yeah.
So brief pause, just in case anyone has tuned in since we've started chatting. I want to make sure folks know that hey, we're here with Matt and Nic from North Drinkware. They're talking about their Kickstarter project. If you want to submit questions to us, to Matt and Nic to answer, either do it through this Google Hangout, through the Q&A, or do it through Twitter at Kickstarter Tips is the Twitter that we are watching. Cool. So as discussed, you crossed that 300K mark within a few days of launching, and then you went on to raise another $230,000. I mean, insane. So, so one thing that we hear from a lot of project creators is, great, we launched, we had success, press wrote about us, our list responded, but then maintaining momentum becomes difficult. So what did you do for the next 25 days of your campaign?
Yeah, we tried to keep up our communication on our end with responding to any questions via Kickstarter and posting updates. We also continued the press outreach. There were a number of things that sort of trickled along. Like, for instance, we were lucky enough to end up in the Kickstarter newsletter. So that kind of gave us a bump. I think that was about a week after launch. And then we had some press that took a little bit longer to get going. Like, I think maybe, was it 2 weeks after we launched, we ended up getting a little story in the New York Times, which was really cool. So that gave us a bit of a bump.
But I think, like Nic said, I think a lot of it was just continuing to follow up on leads that may not be as immediate as like, here's the story that you've seen in other places on our channel.
So what does that mean, to continue to follow up on leads? What did you?
Well, I mean, I think so much. What we've learned and what we are still dealing with right now is that so much of a Kickstarter campaign is, I think, managing communication. And that communication onslaught is extreme. So it's a lot of people reaching out through email on info@ or whatever, reaching out in comments on the Kickstarter, reaching out in comments on Facebook or comments on Instagram or comments on Twitter. And so you sort of have this sort of explosion of different paths that people are coming in, and managing that communication back out and following up on leads. And some people are saying, hey, when you can sell your glasses, I want to sell them on my store. And you're like, okay, cool, I'm gonna try to remember that later. I'm not gonna deal with that right now. And then people are saying, we want to write a story about you. And you're going through like, is this real? Is this somebody that wants us to pay to do something? I don't know. Like, or is this an actual story? And so just sort of trying to keep that organized and trying to follow up on people that have reached out that you may have missed, because again, the communication went from us telling people to be excited about it to so many people being excited about it that it's hard to make sure we're getting back to everybody. So that's really what we tried to keep doing. And then as best as possible on all of our social channels and our outgoing communication, giving updates as we could that was like, this is crazy, like we're going to do everything we can to try to stay on top of it. So I mean, I think from a communication standpoint, that's what that means, is like just really just trying to continue to follow up and make sure that like as stuff starts to lull a little bit more, you have time to go like, did we ever get back to that person that hit us on that thing?
Yeah, and just trying to keep everything really positive and keep people feeling good about the campaign and address any issues that come up. Like we had this, one of the questions that got asked a lot was about local pickup, and so it took us a little while to figure out how to work around the constraints that we had and try to come up with a solution that worked for the backers who wanted that. So we were eventually able to do that and figure out a plan, and then we communicated that. And so I think that was, just keeping things positive and responding to people's questions and requests.
So important. We hear this from successful creators, especially guys who you have a harder time because you have so much more to manage, but being able to keep up with your backers and really manage that communication flow is so key. Speaking of communication flow, we have a couple questions that have come in via Google Plus. So from Alan, did you guys have financial backing before your Kickstarter campaign, or did you self-fund up until you launched?
That's a good question. Yeah, we self-funded. I think altogether we probably had in less than $8,000 to get us to get prototypes made, to get just investing in mostly glass blowing time and things like that. Buying a URL. We bought a little bit of packaging beforehand. We bought 1,000 pieces of packaging, which we were confident would be far more than we would possibly need. But it wasn't an exorbitant amount of money, and that's where honestly the 15 grand came from, was like, if we can get paid back for that and we can sort of invest more time in making some prototypes, like that'll get us up and running.
That's great. Yeah, because people often want to know, like, how do you set a funding goal? So that's good insight. Alan also would like to know, did you guys work with any PR firms for your project?
We didn't. We tried to do, Matt's wife, Lee, has a background in PR.
Yeah, so my wife's
had a little bit of an advantage in that sense.
Nice.
Yeah.
Teams, go team.
Yeah, clutch. So I think, Lee's understanding of the space and how to do outreach was important, but honestly, she hasn't worked in PR proper for a number of years. So a lot of the direct contacts were sort of stale. So a lot of it was just, using the advice that I've seen other backers talk about, where, you try to, like I said earlier, try to find people that have written stories about the kind of thing that you're doing, reaching out to them directly. And I think that practice and that behavior she is exceptional at, and was able to do in a pretty positive way that gave us some really good results.
Yeah, but I think now that we've gone through it and we're sharing these tips that we saw online from other people, you don't need a PR firm. I mean, it obviously won't hurt you, I don't think, but just following some simple rules, like trying to be very, responsive and trying to reach out frequently and trying to do a lot of homework to figure out who you should be contacting and finding email addresses and figuring out who the journalists are who might be interested, and just going hard on all that stuff is what made the difference for us, I think.
Tell me a little bit more about how you did that, because as I was listening to you talk about your communication strategy before, and as you're answering the question now, I mean, this sounds like a lot of time and a lot of work, and I know you guys have full-time jobs, so how did you manage that on top of your regular lives?
Well, I guess there's two questions there. The answer to the latter one is we worked at night and on the weekend a lot for a few months.
Yeah.
And then to answer the other question, I think as an example, in Oregon, for the local newspaper here, we looked up old articles and found out who the journalist was who writes the most about beer. And then we found that guy's email address and we emailed him and said, hey, we have this project starting. We think you'd be interested in it. And so rather than just sending it to the general info at Portland Tribune, we found the actual guy and sent a personal note to him with our names on it.
Yeah.
So, and I think that idea copy paste probably 100 times.
Yeah.
And so, it was a ton of work. And honestly, I think one of the biggest things that was a huge success for us is being a team of 3 was huge, because we could start to divvy up stuff. And so, you know, Lee would manage the press outreach, and Nick was managing the Kickstarter page, and I was managing social media. So when you spread it out, and it still is intense, but it's manageable. And so that was huge for us, honestly. I think the fact of having more than one person on a team to be able to support, I think would be pretty key. It would be really daunting and intense to be able to do it just as an individual, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I bet. So let's change. I think that's, first of all, I just want to underscore great advice. We hear that from people a lot. Just having that support in place is so key.
Yeah.
So I want to change tacks a little bit. Think about the fulfillment. You guys are in the midst of fulfillment right now. You seem pretty relaxed. Looking at your project updates, it seems like things have been rolling. You've had a few hiccups, but for the most part, it's been working. I would love to know the secret to your success. How did you plan for that? How did you make sure that it would be as smooth as it's been?
Well, it's been a lot of management. I think one of the big decisions that we made after the success of our project was to use a fulfillment vendor. So our original plan was to pack and ship everything ourselves out of Matt's basement.
Yeah.
But once our numbers got so high, we realized that wasn't really going to be feasible, and we didn't want to spend all of our waking hours packing and shipping boxes. We wanted to focus on, production and designing new products and answering Kickstarter questions and things like that.
Yeah.
So we sort of shopped around a little bit and then partnered with a third-party logistics vendor in town, which for people who don't know, third-party logistics is a category of business that you can find in most cities around the country. The acronym that gets used is 3PL. So we found a 3PL vendor who we deliver our finished goods to them. So we deliver glasses to them, and we deliver packaging materials to them, and then they wrap the glasses, package them, and ship them for us. And so when we also deliver our orders to them via a digital system, which has all of the backer name and other information and their shipping address. So that has been extremely helpful.
Yeah, that's been huge, and I think that's been the reason that we can be, like Nick said, that we can focus on things other than just packing boxes. Because honestly, I think the other thing that we did was we just had a lot of planning early on. We had met with 3PL groups before Kickstarter started. I told you we had ordered a little bit of packaging, so we at least knew what that was going to be. We knew what the lead times were. So again, we just had done a lot of that even before
and we had
launched.
Yeah, and we had kind of looked at what the different options or plans were depending on how big the project ended up getting. So if it was this big, we would do it ourselves. If it got medium size, we would partner with this type of a vendor. If it got really big, then we would go with this other type of a vendor. And we could order, and our pricing changed based on those different things, and our lead times changed based on those things.
Yeah. Wow.
So
that's great.
I think the other big thing that happened was our break point number was $250,000. We knew that and that was the biggest number that we had ever talked about. And we would talk about it in whispers. I don't know. I mean, if it ever got that big, let's talk about what that would look like, because that was a break point of, we won't be able to deliver that many glasses by the June timeframe that we have committed. And so when we got close to that point, that's when we closed the perks for June backers, and we then duplicated all the perks and made them and said, now what you're backing is something that will ship in September.
Yeah.
And that was the other thing that was a real that was a series of 1 or 2 days that were pretty serious conversations. Should we shut it down? Should we just turn it off, or should we keep going? Because this is way beyond what we thought we could do, and we just wanted to make sure that we had a strategy where we could keep it going. So that was a really interesting Kickstarter specific moment that was we might want to just shut it down, because I don't know if we can't keep our promises past this point.
Yeah. So that was a decision you actually made in the middle of your campaign.
Oh yeah. Well, in very close partnership with our manufacturers, sitting down, talking about it, holy shit, this is crazy. Now what? And then what we decided was, if we push the date back, everybody was like, I'm cool with that. Like, I think we could do that. And we're like, all right, well, let's do that, see where it goes.
That's really good. And it worked out.
Yeah, it did. Yeah.
Cool. So we have a question in our Q&A area of this Hangout from Randy Ryan. He would like to know if you use LinkedIn to locate contacts. So I guess the people you reached out to promote your project.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's just one of the tools that we use. LinkedIn is a great way to find people if their profile is public, and that's, for instance, if that's the journalist that you're trying to find, if they have decided to make their information public, I think it's totally fair game to use that.
Yeah. I mean, we went full detective on like any medium, and so sometimes it's LinkedIn, sometimes it's through Facebook, sometimes it's through commenting to them at Twitter or direct messaging them through Instagram or any of that stuff. So,
and I mean, we tried to be professional about it. We weren't just like blindly messaging the editor of the New York Times. Like it was it was somebody who seemed appropriate for what we were doing.
Yeah.
But I think once we got past that barrier of, okay, this seems like it should be appropriate, then
relevant to that
find
person.
whatever information is public.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So just quick follow up on that LinkedIn question. So did you use the actual messaging system in LinkedIn, or were you just looking for that information and then emailing the people?
Most was just looking for the information.
Okay.
There was some LinkedIn wasn't a big tool for us in our project, but
especially because most of the people we reached out to are journalists, and so most of their information is public. You can figure out how to contact them through the info sheet on the website of their publication, or just by Googling their name, you can usually find something.
Yeah.
Right. Cool. So we have another question that has come in through Hangouts. Did you include a margin for fulfillment when you were planning your reward costs? So knowing you were going to maybe pivot to a fulfillment service, which might change your cost, did you plan for that, or how did you account for that cost?
That's a great question, and I think a lot of our cost planning was initially was planned around a retail model, which gave us a little bit more margin to play with.
Right. Yeah.
And I think as we've gotten through it, of course, things are more expensive than we had expected. But thankfully, we had a line item in there for third-party logistics all along. And honestly, it's really just I would call it shipping and handling, right? Yeah. So it's the idea of if it wasn't, so there's shipping costs, but there's this sort of handling cost, which is like, even if we had to rent a space and we had to be paying rent on that space, and we were going to rent a van and do all of that, like whatever that would have looked like if we weren't using the 3PL, would have had costs associated to it. So for sure, just the operational expense of warehousing, packaging, and shipping stuff was absolutely worked into our sort of bill of materials, or our BOM, really early on, which is, again, I think another really, really important thing for making any product, is just being really clear on what your costs are, what you expect to get for it, and making sure that you're covered, because stuff is for sure more expensive than you think it is.
That's great. I'm going to do a final call for questions from any viewers. Viewers, if you would like to send us a question, do it through Google Hangouts or do it through Kickstarter Tips, at Kickstarter Tips on Twitter. We are here to talk to Matt and Nic. They're here to answer your questions. I'm just going to ask a quick follow-up on that while we see if anything comes in. You guys sound really knowledgeable about making and shipping physical goods. You throw out these acronyms like 3PL and BOM. Was this all new? Is this all part of your research for launching this company, or? I mean,
it's a blend. We've learned a ton through doing this, but Matt and I both also have a background in product design and engineering and manufacturing. I have a mechanical engineering background and have worked as a mechanical engineer and program manager at a number of different places, and Matt has a product design background as well, and has been in and out of different positions in the consumer goods industry.
Yeah, I think that both of us have made products that have been manufactured in the hundreds of thousands or millions and shipped globally, and dealt with that through the experience and brands that we've had in our past. And so I think actually that's what was fun about this project, was we were we were excited to do something small as a little side project that we work on in the garage and ship out of the basement to try to sort of get more involved in the weeds of what happens, which we are fully involved in now. We honestly, like, we know through our professional backgrounds and experience, we know what it looks like when something is big. But you know, when it's really small, that was the fun part to try to figure out. And I think
now we're in like the sort of medium size.
Yeah.
If you compare us to a brand like Nike or something like that, we're obviously much smaller than them, and so we're figuring out like what medium looks like for us.
Yeah,
it feels big to us, but in the scheme of things, it's small.
Yeah, technically you're in the small, right?
Right, and so that's what's been really fun, is that we get to tap into our experience and our background on what big looks like, and then we know it's smaller, it's bigger than tiny now, and so we're just trying to sort that out.
And I think part of for launching this brand and doing this project in general, part of the reason we wanted to do it and the fun of it has been to figure out in detail all of these things that throughout our careers we've seen other people doing, sitting next to us or in the same company or whatever. We've seen the people who run the shipping department or run the graphic design department or operate social media, but Matt and Leah and I have never been the ones actually doing that. But we've, over the years, you kind of develop your own opinions and you wonder, oh, maybe I could do that better, or maybe I would do it differently. And so this has been our chance to execute all of those thoughts that we've had, and it's been really fun to figure all that out.
Yeah.
Very cool.
And I think just as a follow-up to that question too, I think the thing for us that we were, and I think this is important for any sort of creator considering a Kickstarter project, is it's a business plan. Like we are starting a product business, and so being as professional as we can about understanding the complexity of what we're getting into, and all of the long tail of stuff that's going to come with it. Kickstarter enables us to reach a really broad audience, but I mean, we treated it just the same as it would be writing a business plan and submitting for funding from other investors. And so making sure that we're dialed on all of the production side of things, I think is important for anybody starting a product company or brand through a medium like Kickstarter.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. That's great. So I think we have one final audience question. There's actually two. One is I think a very quick one. So they're asking if you're planning to sell in retail. It sounds like yes.
The plan is yes. I think we're probably gonna focus on direct for the first year.
Some limited retail.
Yeah, really select retail. But honestly, we need to get our pricing more dialed in so that we can afford it.
Before you can get there. So this was the bigger question, same person. They want to know if you've been offered licensing or distribution from a larger corporation, and I maybe riff on that a little if you have. We've been reached out to by a variety of different manufacturers and other people. I think we're really excited to just keep it ours and to keep the proposition true, and so we're choosing to keep doing everything ourselves. And I think we have been reached out to by a variety of different groups and partners. But what's special about our product is it's a locally made product for local made beverages, and the care and consideration that goes into that from all of the people that make the beers and ciders and juices and water and everything that comes from each region. We like to keep it really close and really tight, and we think that that's the special sauce that we have, that that no matter how big or how if it got into other people's hands, that's our distinction. So we're excited to sort of keep that up. Very cool. Well, thank you guys. This has been awesome. I really appreciate the time.
Thanks for having us. Yeah, it's been super fun.
Yeah, and for our viewers, just so you know, we will be posting a link to the video of this in all our channels, and we'll be continuing to do this every week with different creators from other categories. And we're excited to hear from you guys and your questions, and we'll have different creators answering them. So it's going to be fun.
Thanks a lot, guys. Thanks for the
time.
time.
All right, thank you.
Cheers.
Bye. Good. I like the glass.